Israel Finkelstein believes that when the Assyrians conquered this land, they wiped out all the leadership of the tribes of Israel. The population was either killed or assimilated into other parts of the Assyrian Empire. He doesn't believe they could be found today.
This, you were saying, was the building that the Assyrians built once they took over this area.
Yes, this is one of the two palaces that the Assyrians built here.
What happens then to the rulers of the northern kingdom when the Assyrians come in and take over?
The rulers were deported. We don't know whether all of them, part of them, most of them, many of them. We don't have this kind of information, neither from the Bible nor from the Assyrian text, and of course not from archaeology. Archaeology cannot speak about a person. But most of this population probably assimilated in Mesopotamia.
So the people who are on a quest to find the lost tribes and to recover them and bring them back to Israel, they would only have to travel as far as Mesopotamia?
I don't think that you can travel anywhere and look for the lost tribes. I mean, I make a distinction between what we know from archaeology, history, and so on, and all sorts of popular ideas of going this way or that way and finding a lost tribe. There's no need whatsoever to go around the world, in my opinion, and look for lost tribes.
Fair enough. But the archaeology here says that the people did leave.
The people did leave, the people did die, some of them were deported to Mesopotamia, some of them continue to live here.
Okay. Well, that's valuable, and seeing this certainly brings to me a sense of what community existed in the northern kingdoms.
To me too.
Israel Finkelstein tells me that Assyrian rule lasted for almost 100 years, that they went to great lengths to split up ethnic groups and cultures. So if it's true that none of the 10 lost tribes could have possibly survived intact, where does this leave the Lemba? I've certainly seen some evidence that they did make at least part of the journey they claim, but I can't prove a link to the Holy Land. There seems to be no trace of them left here at all. But there's one piece of evidence the Assyrians couldn't destroy. If the Lemba's claim is true, the proof should be in their blood. It's now possible to trace the Lemba's ancestry through their DNA, and that's just what scientists in South Africa have done. I'm going back to the Lemba's current homeland to find out the truth behind this fascinating mystery.
Doctor?
I've returned to South Africa, the current home of the Lemba, an African tribe who call themselves Original Hebrews. We've traced the journey they claim to have made across the whole continent of Africa. I've seen evidence the Lemba were traders and craftsmen, that they helped build great stone cities in Zimbabwe and South Africa. But it's proven very difficult to locate any evidence linking the Lemba to the famous lost tribes of Israel. But I'm not finished yet. In fact, there could still be solid proof behind their claim to Jewish ancestry. That's why I've come to Johannesburg. The scientists here at the National Health Laboratory Services have screened the genetic profiles of the Lemba and their neighboring tribes, the Venda and the Bantu. They've come up with some revealing conclusions.
I heard of the Lemba many years ago.
Dr. Trevor Jenkins has been the lead geneticist in the study of the Lemba for the last 20 years.
And I didn't really have much interest in pursuing their actual identity until a friend who had been studying the Lemba had detected some Jewish influences in the music of the Lemba.
So their music actually differs from the people around them. And that brought you in to study the genetics?
Yes.
So the genetic data doesn't say that the Lemba are Jewish as much as it says they have Semitic origins.
Yes, that's how we put it. What we were saying was that there's a non-African contribution to the gene pool of the Lemba, which is not evident in the peoples amongst whom they live in that part of the world.
You mentioned non-African influences. If someone didn't have genetic data or the testing available, how could you determine if one group is Jewish or not?
I distrust relying on morphological features to categorize populations.
So someone couldn't say, oh, he looks Jewish, she looks Jewish, he's not Jewish, she's not Jewish. That wouldn't have any bearing on the issue of Semitic origins.
I don't think so. The Lemba...
Dr. Jenkins believes DNA always trumps appearances, and the Lemba's claim to Jewish ancestry may indeed have some genetic support. Not only is their DNA very different from their neighbors, but according to his colleague, Dr. Himla Sudyal, it may have a non-African, even Jewish connection.
I'm Josh.
Good to see you.
Yes.
Take a seat. Sorry,
great.
I have gloves on, so I prefer not to shake your hand.
That's fine. Thank you. So I've come back to Johannesburg for more information about the Lemba, and I'm curious if you could tell me about the research you're doing.
Yes, this is the very interesting thing, that the South African Lemba harbor a particular Y chromosome pattern or lineage that's common in people who identify as the Kohanim or the Jewish priests.
Okay.
In the Jewish tradition, the Kohanim are part of the priestly caste. Amazingly, scientists have isolated a strand of DNA that's strongly associated with the Kohanim. It's called the Kohen modal haplotype, and it's almost exclusive to Jews who claim the priestly heritage. Almost exclusive. The Kohen modal haplotype has been found among the priestly caste of the Lemba.
The observation that the Cohen pattern was commonest in that one particular group is something that begs exploration.
This link supports the Lemba's oral history and the archaeological clues we've seen in the places they say they lived.
Hardcore time.
But Himla is quick to point out the limitations of genetic science.
Now, in terms of whether the Lemba are Jewish because they have the Cohen modal haplotype or not, is something that science cannot address. Because cultural identity is a social construct. No genetic data is going to tell you that you are Jewish, or that you are Hindu, or that you are Christian, or any religious domination.
Himla tells me that the presence of the Kohen modal haplotype can't tell us anything about the Lemba's religion. Yet just as remarkably, it can tell us where their ancestors came from, and it's not in Africa.
There is this interesting genetic information showing us that some of the original founders did come from other parts of the world, other than Africa. From our data, I would put my money on saying it's the Middle East.
Himla is convinced that Lemba ancestors did indeed come from the Middle East. I'm excited to get back to the Lemba to see what they make of this. And I've got the perfect opportunity. It's the Lemba's annual festival, and I've been invited. It's hard to believe that these people, who to the casual observer look just like the other African communities they live among, actually do have DNA passed down from Middle Eastern forefathers. This proves that when it comes to race, looks really can be deceiving. This annual festival is a chance for the oral history and traditional songs of the Lemba to be passed on to the next generation. This song tells the story of the Lemba's journey all the way from Israel to South Africa. Having traced this journey, I'm eager to hear what Samuel Moeti thinks about the DNA evidence.
So the genetic testing actually proved to the doubters what you and your forefathers have been saying for generations. That must be exciting news.
It is.
I'll be honest, I hadn't heard of the Lemba. I knew very little about the people. But having spent time making the journey from Jerusalem down through Zimbabwe, having spent time here at this festival, seeing what your people are all about, I can only sum it up in one word, and that's shalom.
Shalom.
We've seen how science has backed up the claims of the Lemba in the face of years of doubt and prejudice. The archaeological clues, the DNA evidence, and the Lemba's own oral history add up to a very convincing argument.
One of the most challenging aspects to doing this journey and seeing what it was like for the Lemba to go from the northern parts of Israel down into South Africa is that there's very little archaeological evidence on the ground that says definitively this is what the Lemba did. So this is why I think the genetic component is so compelling, because it's hard to fake the DNA. It's in your blood.
It reminds me that first impressions can often be misleading. It was hard to believe that a tribe of black Africans could be the descendants of ancient Israelites. But that's exactly what they appear to be.
Brothers and sisters, they are there. We are not lost. We
we are scattered. We are original Hebrew.